when that merger failed. Now, so JetBlue, and by the way, they, now Joanna's in. I think bringing in Marty, Brian already said this. I mean, Marty's. I'm a huge Marty fan. I'm also a huge Daniel Schurz fan. Those two are now the dynamic duo to watch in this industry. They're just some of the most capable, for completely different and complementary reasons. So they're just doing the smart, not necessarily sexy thing, which is look, islip back into Boston. I think islip is genius. There are a lot of people on Long Island who would like to remain loyal or be loyal to JetBlue. Spirit, on the other hand, I mean, look again in Ted Christie's defense. I'm sure he stood in front of his board and been like, I told you so. Like, I literally told you so. And now he still has the mess to deal with. I don't. Spirit's future is probably not a Spirit. The over-under is still very heavily with Frontier. I know Frontier keeps saying, no, we don't want to, but I think they've officially bid through the bankruptcy process. But the over-under, and I've made this prediction actually on our podcast, which I probably won't get to till after this publishes. Again, I have to throw out Brett Snyder because it was with a conversation with him. Where we just really like the idea if there's one airline that could find so much value in South Florida operations, believe it or not, it's United Airlines. Not saying they're going to buy Spirit, but I'm saying they got to be looking really close at whatever may or may not shake out with Spirit, because a Fort Lauderdale Latin American hub, there is no airline that would be more valuable, that hub would be more valuable to than United Airlines. And they have to be looking at those gates with customs and everything in that new terminal, licking their chops, looking for an opportunity. That's kind of the contrarian take.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what Courtney said. I think, maybe early preview of, our Airline Geek trivia, Ashwin and Peter, but back, and I'll date myself, back in the late 90s when I was an undergraduate university, United actually used to have a hub or mini hub in Miami at the time, down to Latin America. And then they would have 727, 737s that served a variety of cities. I think New Orleans, Atlanta, Newark, amongst others that would go to, non-hub destinations. But it was primarily really focused on feeding the long haul into Latin America for them.
And then they completely left Miami for a while, didn't they? If I remember correctly.
They did.
They did. Yeah. They've gone.
And that was right before the merger, I think.
Yeah,
well, U.S. wasn't the only busy region for acquisitions and that. So maybe switching gears a little bit now to our European audience, Lufthansa and ITA, that got success and approved. Want to get your take, but what's interesting to me is, Lufthansa used to have an Italian branch that they started up to try to get traffic there, and then they have Air Dolomiti that they've had for a long time, which is an Italian carrier. How does this differ? How does this help them, and how is it going to be different than when they had Lufthansa Italia?
Yeah, so I was thinking when I first saw this question, Peter, that we need to phone a friend and get Brett Snyder in on this, because he's if there's one thing he loves, it's to poke around at Alitalia/ITA. I think for Lufthansa at a high level, these guys have the playbook, right? They know how to do this, how to do airline M&A, how to incorporate other airlines. They've got this, multi-hub, multi-brand strategy, and they've deployed it really well with Austrian, Brussels, Swiss, and other carriers. I think for them, probably the pivot this time, Lufthansa Italia, when they had that operation, Air Dolomiti, that's all focused on northern Italy. With ITA/Alitalia, you're getting Rome, right? And that's a key hub for them. And Lufthansa will bring, I think, a level of scale and focus to the airline, as well as offering connecting opportunities, more premium traffic. If you look at the Italian market, and either domestically within Italy or Italy to EU, that market is really controlled or dominated by Ryanair and EasyJet, and ITA Alitalia is a much smaller player. So being able to have that Lufthansa connection, I think strategically it's very important for them.
Yeah, I get the sense, and I know absolutely nothing about how this merger was eventually consummated, but I get the sense that Lufthansa was the obvious player, right? And they knew it, and everybody else knew it, and so they were just like, "We will sit here until you are desperate enough to give us the airline." And eventually, that's probably what happened. So, really, how are we defining success here? I think this is going to be a success for Lufthansa because, like Brian said, they know exactly what they're doing. ITA's, I mean, there's a lot of legacy with Alitalia and ITA, and a lot of challenges that come with that. And I think Lufthansa, they were the only buyer. Like they were the only buyer left that really could have done that. And I'm sure that this will work out for them. I'm sure they have their own headaches with it, but that's kind of what stands out to me in terms of that merger.
Yeah, I remember Peter had this slide up. It was probably one of the trivia questions in a previous podcast, and the entire slide was filled with the Lufthansa group. Like there's that many actual entities,
Sure.
right? And it just keeps growing. So it really feels like Europe heading towards this, three large groups controlling majority of the traffic and the two or three low cost carriers, right? That's just the trend. It seems like there's no smaller player that can survive for too long. It's just going to get eaten up by one of these 5 or 6 big players.
Which, in fairness, so if you compare the EU, and sorry UK, but I'll lump you in with this, you have an economy that's similar to the United States. You have a geography, just the overall size. I think it's a little bit higher population, but you have similar markets.